Hey, welcome everyone. This is Annie Liv from SARE. We have a couple different faces today. Nelson is stuck somewhere around the world and he's hopefully coming back soon because, SareCon is coming up. So I'm going to introduce our co-host today. We've got Stella Hahn and our admin, George Lang, that will be leading the conversation. So if you guys tune into our previous class, we talked a little bit about partnerships and how members of SARE, we can form our investor group together and purchase properties, including short-term rentals. And so I'm gonna leave the conversation over to Stella and George to handle and to introduce our guest speakers for today. So take it over, you guys. George, you're on mute.
Yep, I'm talking with the mute button on. So since this PDF is being shared, Kaitlyn, you want to do a quick intro and then we'll hand over to Justin for an intro as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Justin do his intro first. As CEO, I feel like he gets that that opportunity. And then I'll go into my bit on like the design lead, who I am, what I do, all of that good stuff, and then we'll kick it off and get started. Justin, you want to start?
Hey guys, thank you guys so much for having us. So my name is Justin Miller and I am the CEO of Showplace. And my journey with short-term rentals started in 2013. I co-founded a company in the Bay Area called Pillow, and we were fortunate enough in 2018 to be able to get acquired by Expedia. And since then, I've just had a passion for short-term rentals, and we've helped hundreds of short-term rental investors all over the country. And that's why in 2020, we started Showplace. And Showplace is really here to help investors with two main things when it comes to short-term rentals. We help to set up new listings, and Kaitlyn will go into the design process and how that works. And then also we help with automating all of the restocking for short-term rentals. But enough about me. We want Kaitlyn to share with you guys in the topic of today, the top 5 mistakes that we see investors making when setting up a short-term rental. And Kaitlyn is an absolute wealth of knowledge, and she's going to walk you guys through these top 5 mistakes that we literally consult with tons of investors every day and help them when setting up their listing. And if you guys have questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Justin. And thank you all for having us. We're really excited to chat with you guys today. As Justin mentioned, so I'm the design lead here at Showplace. That encompasses a lot of different things, but just a little background on me. I was a former host advisor and designer at Airbnb for a few years on their Plus team. So if you've heard of Airbnb Plus, it was basically a pilot program that we started from the ground up, essentially working with a lot of hosts that were doing a great job on the hospitality side of things, but maybe we're getting dinged from design to amenities to what they should be stocking or what they should be paying attention to when setting up a short-term rental. And it was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved working there. But in the time that I left, I started my own company doing property management. That was about 2 years ago. Started with one property in Southern California, and I now manage 10 properties in Nashville and in Southern California. So 2 very different markets, but have learned so much from being a host myself, just the ins and outs of short-term rental. And for us, really on Showplace, when I joined Showplace, it was such an amazing opportunity because really what our team is driven by is just helping people from day one. There's so many things that you learn as a host or as an investor, along the way. And we really want to help you guys have that knowledge up front to mitigate all those things that I wish somebody would have told me 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I started hosting myself. So we'll get into it. And so one of the first mistakes that we see a lot of investors, a lot of first time people coming into this space making is sourcing from the wrong vendors. And what I mean by that is you have this property, you've invested in this property. What is the next step? As you can imagine, when you move into your own home, you usually have some time to kind of get to know the space, learn kind of all of the ins and outs of what works, what doesn't work. You might leave a room empty for a little while until you decide what that room is going to be. In a short-term rental world, we don't have that luxury, right? Time is money in this industry. And so it's from the get-go, choosing vendors, choosing places that you're going to source products from that are going to not only get you to market as quickly as possible, but also is going to set you up for long-term success. So, you know, what are your options for setup? Right now, there's not a lot of people out there that you can go to for a one-stop shop. And that's really what Showplace is trying to create for our investors, is working with people to make sure that they can go to one place to get everything from your bedding, your bed frames, all of the decor items, but also getting all of those things like can openers and wine openers and all of those little things that make their experience the best it possibly can be. I see a lot of people sourcing from a ton of different vendors and having to manage those logistics, and it just becomes an absolute nightmare for them. And so picking a partner that you can trust to go to for all of those solutions from A to Z is really the best option that we've seen for our investors out there. Mistake number 2, as all of us know, especially with like Prime Day just wrapping up, and all of the shopping that a bunch of people are doing nowadays when it comes to furniture in particular, is I think we're all aware of supply chain, right? We're all aware that there are going to be items that say that they're in stock, they say that they're going to arrive in 1 to 2 weeks, and they don't, or there's a delay, or something ends up happening. And working with vendors, working with multitudes of different vendors, or a place like a Showplace that has a one-stop shop, we can mitigate that for you up front. But a lot of people that I see just kind of rely on, hey, they said that this product's going to be in stock, and I'm going to now wait 2 months for a couch, and I don't have a backup plan. And so always having a backup plan, always having a different sort of, you know, hey, this couch is going to be out of stock. Let's have option A, B, C that we know is going to get to you in time. Having those things on the back burner is always, always, always recommended, just so you're not waiting and you're losing out on that revenue just because a product is delayed. It's just not worth it at the end of the day. So this is probably my favorite topic to talk about when it comes to short-term rentals. So my background before getting into short-term rentals was in space planning and design in the residential market. And so I've worked with contractors, I've flipped properties in Chicago, in California, in Florida, and a bunch of different real estate markets. And the biggest difference that I see in somebody coming into short-term rental, investing in a short-term rental, most of the time, your only experience with outfitting a home is your own, right? Maybe it's a vacation home, maybe it's your home, you know, maybe you and your partner did it together and you have to figure out how to compromise on different styles and all of those different things. However, there is a tried and true way to design a short-term rental versus a residential home. And what I mean by that is, in my own home, for example, I love a good throw pillow, and my husband would probably say we have way too many throw pillows in our house. And I understand that, but it's my home and it's what makes me nice and comfy in that space. In a short-term rental, having a million throw pillows, having a bunch of different surfaces that you have to clean, that you have to maintain, that you have to make sure aren't fraying, make sure don't have stains on them. The more items that you add into a space that are breakable, that aren't, absolutely necessary to enhance the experience of your guest, just becomes a little bit of a nightmare for your cleaners, for your property managers, for anybody that you're using, in that kind of vein of the project. And so when it comes to designing a short-term rental, picking products for a short-term rental, we're not only thinking about, does it look pretty? Are my photos going to look good? Is this a marketable space? That's kind of the easy part of the job, to be perfectly honest. We can make a space look beautiful in whatever design style you like, or whatever design style we're picking for that specific market that's going to drive your ROI. But at the end of the day, we don't want you investing in a ton of different products that aren't going to impact your guest stay, aren't going to drive that ROI, aren't going to hold up to the test of time. And so it's really thinking about the guest experience, not only from did we create a beautiful space, but also did we think about the guest? And did we think about your cleaners, right? So picking a large bath sheet, which everybody in your own home, you're like, yes, this is wonderful. This is amazing. Love giving these to my guests. Every cleaner would tell you that those towels together are going to take 2 hours to dry, and you're never going to be able to turn over the time. So if you're trying to do back-to-back reservations and you have a 4 to 5 hour window to completely clean the home and to completely flip the property from your guests leaving to new guests arriving, we have to think about all of those different things to make sure that that time frame is actually doable, from a cleanliness standpoint, as well as just from a maintenance standpoint. So that kind of goes perfectly into the next point, choosing the wrong fabrics and materials. One of the things that I see from a design standpoint all the time is I will get inspiration photos from clients of ours, and they're like, I love this coastal chic, everything white, everything, crisp and clean. That's amazing. And when you have control over what is happening in your home. So in your own home, you might be able to say, hey, we don't allow red wine on the couch. That does not happen in a short-term rental. You cannot control everything that your guests are going to do, but you can plan for it. And so when it comes to choosing fabrics, choosing materials, when it comes to choosing bed frames, for example, we try and stay away from upholstered bed frames as much as possible, for reasons we don't need to get into, but those are things that we think about when it comes to design. Are they going to stand up to the test of time? Can they be easily cleaned? One of the biggest things that you're measured on from a short-term rental standpoint is your cleanliness score. And so obviously, after a guest leaves, they're going to leave you a 5-star review, but there's also different sections that they can have underneath of that. And so that's communication, that's location, that's also cleanliness. And when it comes to boosting your listing in the visibility of search, cleanliness scores is one of the top rated things that every search engine looks at, is looking at that cleanliness score. And so when we choose the right materials and we choose the right fabrics, that ends up correlating to higher cleanliness scores that ends up boosting you in search above other rentals that are going to be in your area. So it's very, very important to do that. And then mistake number 5, I'm actually going to pass this to Justin just for a quick second so that he can tell you a story about maybe why going with the frugal option is not the best. Justin, do you want to tell your story about your first setup?
Yeah, so my quick anecdote here is, for my first short-term rental, I was like, oh, I'm going to save so much money. I'm going to go to IKEA. And I ended up saving obviously some money going to IKEA. But because the assembly process was so manual, and we had like 30 different pieces for a 3-bedroom home, I hired a TaskRabbit who was there like for 7 days straight, just putting together all of the material and all of the stuff from IKEA. And so when you added up the price and time I had to spend setting up the home from IKEA, I probably could have purchased something that was going to last me a lot longer, that was maybe a little bit more expensive than IKEA. So there are some considerations about going with, IKEA type furniture and others that you have to like factor in.
Yeah. And so to go off of that a little bit, there is a design philosophy when it comes to areas of the home that you want to invest in. So when we think about marketability and we think about those first 5 photos that are going to grab your guest's attention. So there's always your hero shot. So that's whatever area of the home you're most proud of. So whether that's an outdoor space, whether that's a living room, whether that's a kitchen, you're always going to have your hero shot from a marketing standpoint. That's your first photo. And your first 5 photos are what are going to be listed from a desktop standpoint for you to look at. And so when a booking guest goes to your listing, those first 5 photos are what kind of makes or breaks your marketing. And what I pay attention to when we're allocating budget within the home is paying attention to what those first 5 photos are, what's going to bring them in, what's going to make them go, oh, I want to learn more about that property versus the other ones that they're scrolling through. And we also have to think about where the budget makes the most sense to allocate. So most booking guests, so that is the guest that books the home, will end up staying in the master bedroom. It's just what ends up happening. As you can imagine, if you're going on a family vacation, or if you're going with friends, most of the time, whoever ends up booking the home kind of gets dibs on that master suite, right? And so if we allocate a little bit more of the budget into master bedroom, into living room, into appliances within the kitchen that are going to make a difference, a really nice, option for a coffee maker, making sure that they have everything that they can need to make a family dinner, if that's something that they want to do, if they have access to a kitchen in your home, making sure that we're allocating the budget in ways that make sense. It doesn't mean that we're not still making sure that the second bedroom, the third bedroom, the fourth bedroom aren't also amazing spots for them to experience, but making sure we're allocating the budget in those key areas is really where we've seen hosts have the most success. So going with the frugal option makes sense for some things. We don't need to be spending $1,000 on a coffee table. It's not going to impact whether your guests say, I loved this home because the coffee table was so great, or because the side table was so great. However, is there a comfortable couch that they can all, there's enough seating for them to have dinner together? If your guest capacity is 8 people, do you have a dining table that can accommodate 8 people? Do you have a seating area that can accommodate 8 people that maybe want to watch a movie together? Really, my philosophy in design and in just really making sure you're creating a good space is thinking of all of those different things that your guest is going to experience. So something Justin would laugh if I didn't mention is you're investing in all of this great furniture. Maybe you did a remodel and you refinished the floors. Put USB lights next to your beds, because if not, they're going to be moving your furniture across your brand new floors, scratching up your floors to try and plug their phones in at night. So things like that we really think through, because your space is the backdrop for your guests to create memories. And if they can create memories seamlessly because you've thought of all of those different things up front, it's going to mitigate all of those different concerns. So that way, when something inevitably goes wrong, because as hosts, we know there are things that are out of our control. So an air conditioner starts acting up, or, something goes wrong with your smart lock and you have to figure out how to get them into the home. those are things that are going to inevitably happen. But if you've thought about all of these different aspects, there is a lot more, there's a lot more room for forgiveness if you've truly thought about all of these different things to go into the home.
Hey, Kaitlyn.
Up front. Yeah.
Question. What do you think about butcher block countertops? Yay or nay from a design standpoint?
So it depends on, I would say it depends on the market. If you're in a cabin-like market where having kind of that shabby chic, butcher block countertop where it adds some character to the space is great. I would say from a maintenance standpoint, it can be a little bit of a nightmare, just treatment wise. I love a good butcher block. I think it looks really good, but I think it depends on the market that you're in. And if it's going to match with like the aesthetic that you're going for. If you're going for a super modern aesthetic and you have a butcher block countertop, I would probably steer away from it because it's not going to match with like the cleanliness and the clean lines of the rest of the space. There's going to be staining, there's going to be kind of character, there's going to be chop marks that you see on the countertop. And that's okay if that's what you're going for, but make sure that the rest of the home kind of matches that aesthetic. That was a very specific question, Justin.
Yeah, that one came from the crowd. I think it came
it.
up when you were talking about the materials.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go to the next slide, Justin? Sorry.
I'd rather open it up for questions and Q&A if there are any. I think this is a good opportunity to hear some questions. Any brands that you recommend as step up from IKEA? So kind of what's the hierarchy of brands and how do you think about the various brands out there?
Yeah, so at Showplace, we work with about 30 different brands and vendors that we source a lot of our projects from. So we get wholesale pricing that we pass along to our clients. So we work with a bunch of people that I absolutely love. I would say some of them are Article, Phantom Chef is a really great one, just for a lot of kitchen supplies and things like that. We work with a handful of wholesale vendors as well. We work with some other wholesale vendors such as Four Hands or Moe's. So those are really great options. Yita Home is kind of on that like lower price point, but still has some really great ancillary items that we work with. Levity is another one. I would say Levity is a new brand that recently kind of came onto the marketplace a handful of years ago. And what I love about Levity is they are a lot of lounge seating. They just came out with a dining set line as well as dining chairs. And all of their products have washable covers. And so, as you can imagine, in a short-term rental, that's like music to my ears because having to maintain anything that's soft fabric in a short-term rental can be very difficult. So there's a lot of steam cleaning that's involved in a lot of those. And being able to just turn over a space and actually take something off, put it in the washer, it's going to hold up against, kind of the test of time. Those are probably my top vendors that I enjoy working with.
Question, Kaitlyn.
Yes.
When you work with folks remotely in a remote environment, do you need to have a video tour of the home or a floor plan? Like what kind of steps do you need to fully assess the needs?
Yeah, so most of the time when we're working with people that are remote, we will ask for floor plans as well as either photos or a listing link. If they have a 3D tour, that's great. Most of the time, I would say we're usually working with a real estate link of some sort as well as a floor plan. The reason that the floor plan is important is because photos can give me a good sense of kind of what the space is, what the flow of the space is, where products should go. But it doesn't tell me everything a lot of the time. And so being able to know what size furniture should go in each room, that's a big part of it. And so when we're not working off of floor plan, or you're just telling me like, yes, of course a queen bed will fit in that space, or we want to do all king beds. And then I get measurements and I'm like, you can do a king bed, but there's literally room for nothing else. And the guest experience wise, to have a nightstand on both sides, just in case somebody has to take medicine in the middle of the night or needs water in the middle of the night, like being able to put something next to the bed is important. And so guest experience wise would tell me, even though we can fit a king, we should go with a queen because we're going to be able to put nightstands and have them be a little bit more comfortable. So yes, those are all things that we work with, but those are usually the two main ones that we need to get started.
Awesome. And then let's see here. Do you recommend working with someone to help brand or style the property? So I can take this one. So I think as people level up their short-term rental business, we're all trying to maximize our return on investment. So I posted a statistic in here that I think is kind of just worth noting, and how it relates to designing and setting up your business from day one. And that is, we've seen the top 90% of short-term rentals will generally earn like 2 to 3 times more compared to the properties in the 50th percentile. And so that's just like a competition statistic saying that by focusing on setting up your property from day one for success, generally is going to lead to a higher return on investment, based on better experiences, better reviews, but ultimately like why we're all in the business is to like earn more money, and they're definitely correlated to that.
Yeah. And I would say, so just to touch a little bit on like the brand side of things. So that's a fairly new concept that's really come into the marketplace, I would say over the last like 2 years or so. Start having an Instagram for your Airbnb, using social media to do outreach, having kind of a specific brand for your homes. I definitely think if that's the route that you want to go, that it behooves you to do that once you've kind of gotten the ball rolling, unless your property lends itself to be something very unique. So if it's something that's completely different than what other people are doing in the market, definitely give it a name, right? Like give it a name, create a brand, do something that's like really fun, that's a little bit different. I would say, I think there's a balance there. There are some people that I've seen that lean really, really heavily into it, and like everything is branded in their space. And so they give away like coffee mugs and everything, every single thing that's like in their home is branded. I haven't seen that create that much of a difference when it comes to ROI, but when it comes to marketing, specifically if it's easier for you to market your own brand, whether that's a handful of properties that are going to be in the same space. One of the things we like to say is like, if you're going to have a handful of properties, maybe in one location, so Palm Desert, for example, if you have 3 locations that are going to be in Palm Desert, and you want them to kind of be similar in style or have a similar brand kind of throughout the home, absolutely. That's something that I think really makes you stand out. It makes other people kind of look at your property as well as the other 2 options that they might have in the same area. But it's not something that I would invest a ton of money in up front. It might be something like down the road, once you kind of regapped that ROI, that makes sense to invest in a little bit more.
Awesome. And then just really quickly, Timeframe for designs and getting shipments. We generally like to work on a 4 to 6 week time frame, and typically the clients and investors that we work with are in the process of closing on the property. Like, hey, I'm closing on August 1st and I want to minimize the downtime, so we can work with them, get the items ready based on the delivery and assembly required, and kind of get that set up for them. Let's see here. Is Okay, Kaitlyn, is discounting your nightly rate, I'm assuming here, for repeat uh, visits? So you have someone stays at your home and you offer them maybe a discount to come back. Has that been successful in your opinion? What do you think?
Yeah, so I would say you do that. So two things. I would say you do that if you loved them as a guest. Not every single guest deserves a discount for coming back. That's just the nature of the business. But if you had somebody that was a pleasure to guest, to host, they, they left your home in really great condition. They were really great at communicating. Obviously, I think that it always behooves you to reach out to them and let them know, like, hey, we would love to have you back the next time that you come back. We would love to offer you like a 10% discount. It doesn't need to be anything that's set in stone, but just offering that after someone leaves, it kind of guarantees you a 5-star review, which is always great, because obviously that's what we're here for, is to boost that. But also, one of the things that I've seen a lot of people do later on after they've established, whether it's on an Airbnb or a Vrbo or any booking platform that you're going to have, one of the things that a lot of people will do is establish a website that is a direct booking website. So you can set up your own on like Hostly or a bunch of other different websites that you can actually create a direct booking platform. You can hide that if you want and only share that website with guests after they've left. So after a guest has left, you usually have their contact information at that point. So you have a phone number or you have an email. And that's a really great way to get people, if you're trying to build your direct booking platform, that's a really great way to slowly do that, to get away from other platforms. If that's something that your goal is. Some people absolutely want nothing to do with going direct. They just don't want to manage it. It's too much of a headache. Completely respect that. But if your business plan is to drive more direct bookings, to save on fees, to save your guests on fees, that's a really great way to do that as well.
Jason, if you're still there, do you want to actually unmute yourself and ask the question? I think that'll be more fun.
Yeah. I was like, please, I'd love to hear from the audience.
I'll stop narrating the questions.
Okay, sure. So I just have a question, I guess. Do you find it more, see how I can phrase it. How do you feel about having guests clean up after themselves versus having the cleaners clean up if the guests use your dishes or whatnot? Because I stayed at a short-term rental and I just find it kind of weird. Maybe that I should be cleaning it up because I'm trying to enjoy my time. Right.
So I think this depends on a lot of different things. It depends on your cleaning fee. I think a lot of the times, a lot of people nowadays are padding their cleaning fee quite a bit. So the cleaning fees can get very high in certain markets, making sure that you're kind of looking at the market to see what the average cleaning fee is and trying to stay within that, frame, I think is great. When it comes to asking guests to clean up after themselves, whatever that looks like, I would say keep it simple, keep it short. I completely agree. Asking somebody to like start a load of sheets or start a load of towels and do all of their dishes and take out all of their trash, like and ends up, like you said, you kind of end up your last morning at the home only doing the cleaning, which is not really a great end to your experience. However, depending on your time frame for turnover, so some of our turnovers are a 5 to 6 hour turnover. So 10 a.m. checkout to 4 p.m. check-in, or 11 to 4 is pretty standard in most markets. And so depending on the size of the home, sometimes your cleaners might say, hey, in order to, be able to turn over the home in that amount of time. With larger homes, they might need a little bit of help. So that might be just loading the dishwasher or just collecting the trash. So I think there's a balance that you can find that is not asking them to clean absolutely everything for you, and making sure you're communicating that early with your guests. Just saying like, hey, we don't ask for much. All we ask is that you gather the dishes and like put them in the sink or load them in the dishwasher, whatever you have time for. And if you wouldn't mind, you know, gathering your trash and making sure you have all of your belongings, that would be super helpful for us. And that way it kind of makes sure that all of the chores are like almost there, but they're not spending the entire morning scrubbing all of the dishes or worrying that they're going to incur extra fees. One thing I've also done with my guests is if they ask for a late checkout, is just asking them to start a load of towels. Hey, absolutely, would love to extend your checkout by an hour and a half. We checked with our cleaners, no big deal. However, that does eat into their cleaning time. So if you wouldn't mind starting a load of towels, that would be super helpful. So there's a balance depending on kind of, again, the size of your home. In a lot of smaller homes, I would say, like, don't worry about it. You know, a lot of our smaller homes, we just say like, hey, hope you've enjoyed your time. Guests expect to do something. And so just saying like, hey, if you could gather your trash for me, there's extra, you know, there's extra bags under the sink if you need them. That would be super helpful. Our cleaning team will take care of the rest. But I agree, I don't want to be doing chores at the end of my vacation. Were there any other questions? Did anybody else want to raise their hand, unmute themselves?
Yes, Kaitlyn, do you actually mind going over all of the services that Showplace covers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so at Showplace, we are an A to Z solution. So essentially what that means is we work with a bunch of different investors in a bunch of different capacities. And so if you have a home that is completely empty, so you bought a home, you inherited a home, whatever it ends up being, and it's completely empty, we can work with you to create the full design, full floor plan, full layout, full service. That also can include if you're remote and you don't want to do the setup yourself. We also have vendors that we work with that can do consolidated shipping. So basically we will warehouse all of the items that are going to go into the home. They will be delivered in a 24, 48 hour time frame. And then we also can hire out for staging companies. That tends to be obviously like a larger budget if we're working with that, just because you don't have to do anything. You don't have to lift a finger. And so that's a really great option for people that are remote, people that can't take time off to go set up their home themselves. We're all busy, you know, time is very precious in this market. And so we do offer front to end solution for that. But there's also a lot in between. So if we've worked with clients before that have a home that they bought that's fully furnished, and it's not been successful on a short-term rental basis, but it could be successful in their market if we change the design of some things. And so we can work on like partial remodels as well. That's definitely something that we've done in the past. And so if you purchase a short-term rental that's fully furnished, we can go in, you know, it's a project we're working on right now with an investor where he, you know, inherited this home and like everything was gray. Every single thing in the house was gray. There was nothing else. It was kind of this just like black and white. And he was just like, I just don't like it. I don't like the style. It doesn't pop. I don't understand from a marketing standpoint how I can make this successful. And so in those instances, you know, we can give them pointers on, you know, how to source all of those things. And so for us, one of the biggest perks of working with us is you'll not only get our design knowledge and, you know, obviously access to our team, but you also end up saving money because as a conglomerate, we can advocate for our hosts. We help hundreds, thousands of hosts across the country. So we have buying power that an individual host doesn't have. So a lot of those larger brands that we work with, we actually can pass along those discounts. And so we might
Hey,
get,
Kaitlyn,
yes.
what about for the general like services like TV setup or electrical or maybe ceiling fans, things like that?
Yeah, so that is not something currently that Showplace offers as far as like the hardwire setup. A lot of our investors work with property managers, or they have somebody who's going to be managing the property, and they will do the Wi-Fi setup. They will do a lot of those things. We can source the products for you, so we can source smart locks and security cameras and pass along those discounts so you have access to them. But I would say from a setup standpoint, most of the time I'm seeing people using their on the floor person, property manager to set those things up. Most of the time because they need to have punch list items. So their real estate team is going through punch list items. They have people that are doing renovations or things like that. And certainly if we work with you early enough, if there's renovations that you want our opinions on, or paint colors that you want our opinions on, if we're doing accent walls, those are certainly things that if we're working with you early enough in the process, we can give you guidance of what that might work best for you. And then the last thing that I will say is, so from a furniture standpoint, I know we've talked a lot about the furniture and the sourcing, and those are a lot of the bigger pieces. But the great part about working with Showplace is that we also have built a tool called our Essentials Wizard. And what that means is you basically can go onto our website, or we can create one for you where we take the specs of the home. So if you're telling me it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and we want, 8 people to be able to sleep in the home, we will take those specs and we will give you back recommendations of the quantities of all of the different amenities that are going to go into the home. So that's everything from your plates, your bowls, serveware, cookware, number of sheets, that people need for a house. I would say that's probably one of the things that a lot of people end up missing out on, is because they will get all this really nice furniture, and then they won't be sure of kind of what else they need to have a successful short-term rental. And so we always make sure that that we can do that for you. I see Justin's kind of showing us an example of what that could look like. So as you can see, you'll go through what we can put in, the number of beds that are going to go in each of the home, each of the bedrooms, as well as each of the bathrooms. And this is all customizable as well. So you can select if you're family friendly, if you have an outdoor space, things like that. And what it'll do is it'll actually populate all of the different options for you. And so these are all of the amenities that that Showplace can offer. And so we've thought of everything from A to Z. Obviously, if there are items that you don't want in the home, or items that don't make sense for your specific rental, you can remove them, and we can customize all of this for you. If you already have mattresses, we can take mattresses off. If you already have a handful of these items that you're going to be using, we can customize all of them for you. But when we talk about quantities, those are things that are really important to think about from a guest experience standpoint. And so, as you mentioned, like, nobody wants to be doing their dishes after every single meal. And so if you only have plates for 8 people, they're going to be having to do their dishes after every single meal. And that's not a really great experience. And so we always recommend, I call it the rule of 2, having a 2 products, whatever it is, whether it's towels, whether it's sheet sets, whether it's extra pillowcases, forks, spoons, knives, all of that stuff. Having a minimum of 2 times your maximum guest count is really going to set you up to make sure that you're covering kind of basic needs of all of your guests.
I have a question.
Yes.
What of area do you cover? For instance, let's say I have a beach home in Hawaii, right?
Mhm.
It's gonna need different furniture and materials than something in like Arizona. Like
Absolutely.
you cover something in Hawaii?
Yes. So actually, one of our employees who works on our sales side of things works in individual host. She's actually in Hawaii right now, setting up her new short-term rental. So yes, we do work in Hawaii. We do usually will have to accommodate for ship times and things like that. So there are some vendors that are on the island that are on some of the mainlands that we might work with just to mitigate lead times, just because that can be an issue there. And obviously we would want somebody to be able to be there to set things up, receive products, make sure that things come inside, especially during storm season, just to make sure that, you know, nothing's sitting outside for too long, or doing consolidated delivery. When it comes to the design, I always like to remind anybody that we're going to work with or that who wants to work with us, is design is not, it's not personal for us. It's personal for you because it's your space. But at the end of the day, my goal is to take what your idea of a perfect short-term rental is and turn that into a successful business, and guide you on what that could look like in your specific design style. So if we're working with somebody in Arizona, and they want to go a very like saguaro, boho, you know, sage greens and lots of natural woods and things like that, we definitely can really lean into that design. However, if we're working on a beach home, you know, in Florida or in Hawaii, that's a very different clientele. It's a very different type of market. And so a lot of the times we're looking at comps in your area. So we'll look at different comps in your area to see what other people are doing, so that you can stand out and you can be different. But at the end of the day, our clients always have the final say when it comes to any of the design. And so I'll always tell people, like, if I'm presenting you something and you absolutely love everything, but you hate the color of couch, like tell me that you hate the color of couch. Like, that's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. That's what the revision process is for. So we'll give our recommendations kind of based on our professional feedback. But at the end of the day, you know, I'll quickly share, you know, I just worked with somebody, and when we first started talking, you know, they were like, I absolutely love the coastal design. Like, that's what I want to go with. So we showed them a coastal design and they were like, oh, this is not in my head what coastal design was. And so again, then we go back to the drawing board. We see exactly what what that client really leaned towards. And we ended up with a really colorful, modern, like a contemporary design that he's in love with. And that's great. Those are things that happen throughout the design process. So we really get to know you. We get to know kind of what your target market is. So we ask questions like, who are you trying to market to? Is this young professional or is this family friendly? And if so, there's things that we will put into the home, or there are ways that we will build out the home in order to get to your target market quicker, from a marketing standpoint.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, I love designing homes in Hawaii.
We have a question from Kevin, which is about the timing here. If he's considering a property but hasn't closed on it, can you still engage? So I would say generally the answer is we try to be helpful to anyone at any part of the process. I would say most of our clients are generally under contract on a home, and they say, hey, we're closing August 1st. We want to, line up some of this design, or have a contractor coming in to do some work on August 1st, so we can minimize that downtime. So short answer is yes, we'd love to it help you at any stage, even if you're still in the research phase as well. So we'd be happy to do that. Any other questions? Throw on your camera and go for it.
All right.
I've got a few minutes left. I got one question.
Yeah.
What would you say that super hosts do to make them super hosts, or like the top 1% of hosts that the general population of hosts don't think about, or a blind spot?
So I would say amenities, paying attention to your amenities. So one of the things that both Vrbo and Airbnb have changed over the last about 2-3 years is when you're setting up your rental, there is an option for you to select tons of different amenities that you provide in the home. They have created kind of this long, extensive list of what those amenities are that are important to guests, and making sure that you're checking those boxes is definitely something that we see impacts greatly the success of people from day one. So I would say that's kind of the first step when you're setting up a rental, is paying attention to those amenities. And so that's everything, again, coffee maker, fast Wi-Fi, blow dryers, air conditioning, towels, sheets, pool towels, what different amenities do you have that you're offering that might be different from your competition, and making sure that those are actually selected when you're setting up your rental. A lot of people kind of skip that step because they're just like, oh, they'll go to my home and they'll see that I have all these amazing amenities. And that's great, but it actually will boost you in search if the higher percentage of those amenities that you check off. So that would be my first one. My second one as a host is setting up your quick replies and setting up your templated messages. Anybody who is not doing that is you're probably feel like you're on an on-call doctor all the time, because when mine didn't have that set up, it was like I was so worried about my response time. So response time is another thing that is very highly measured when it comes to your listing and where it is in the algorithm. So there's about 100 different things that affect where your home is in the algorithm, where it shows up in search. And your response time is one of them that is very heavily weighted. And so if you don't know what templates are, or you don't know what quick replies are, a templated response, you can set up auto responses. So when someone books your home, you can set up an auto response. It's basically a templated message that just says, thank you so much, for booking our home. It automatically gets sent. I always have mine automatically sent upon booking. You also can do it for an inquiry as well. And so you can automatically have something set across as an inquiry that says like, thank you so much, and it might only be for after hours. So, if you get an inquiry in the middle of the night, you're not going to get dinged because you didn't wake up at 4 a.m. And say, thank you so much for looking into my home. So those I would say up front are probably the two biggest things that I think a lot of people miss, or just aren't aware that there are options for them during the setup process. Quick replies is the other one. I found myself answering the same question over and over and over again for some of my properties, and it just took up so much of my time. So somebody asking, like where the blender was located, or where to take the trash out if they needed to, or how many beds are in the home, even though you've done everything that you can to show them exactly where the beds are and exactly how the layout is, there's still questions that people have. And so my rule is if anybody asks a question more than 3 times, it becomes a quick reply. Because after that, I'm going into my quick reply and saying like, here's my quick reply. Oh, you need to know how many beds are in this specific home. Here's my quick reply. Here's the breakdown of the bed. Same thing for like local recommendations. Hey, do you have any local recommendations for food? Absolutely. Here's my list of local recommendations. I'm not having to type that out a million times. It's just a quick reply. It's one click of a button and I'm good to go.
One question is, when you first start, how are you competitive? And George, I think you answered this right on. What Airbnb has figured out really well is when you click the button that, hey, I'm a new listing and I'm ready to go active, you get like 2 weeks of free Airbnb traffic, because they've realized that, hey, to keep hosts engaged on the platform, we have to drive a lot of traffic to them. So those first 2 weeks are going to be really, really important. And what I've seen a lot of amateurs make the mistake in the past is you click that active button too soon, like you're not actually ready to launch your listing, and you're going to waste those first 2 weeks of like really precious traffic that Airbnb is going to direct your way.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing as well is within those first 2 weeks, following up with your guests, checking in with your guests, making sure, hey, this is a brand new listing. We'd love your feedback. If there's anything we can do better. Those are kind of like really precious times for you to understand the ins and outs of your rental. If you're able to, the biggest thing that changed when I started opening new properties was having either someone I really trust go and stay at the property, so family, friends, before it goes live, or staying at the property myself for a night or two. You get to experience the home as your guest would, and there are things that, as hopefully, obviously if you work with Showplace, we'll hopefully have thought of all of those things so that we're checking all of those boxes. But there might be an area of the home that you really love that, maybe needs a little extra attention, or things aren't laid out in a way in the kitchen that make the most sense. Those are little things that really, if you stay in the space or you have family and friends stay in the space ahead of time to give you that feedback, really secures those first 3 stays that are so important to get 5-star reviews. Another thing to know is just after having, so your first 3 guests, your star review will not show up. So it's only after your first 3 reviews that your star rating will show up. And so having those first 3 reviews be 5 stars is very important, and just making sure you're checking in with your guests, getting that feedback, also making sure, to let them know, hey, as a small business, as an investor, like, it's important to us that we're paying attention to customer service. I think it really goes a long way with your guests.
Awesome. I'm going to step in here where we're just over time. So I wanted to say thank you to Justin and Kaitlyn so much, and thank you to everybody in the audience for the great questions. Feel free to connect with Justin, Kaitlyn, or anybody else in this group. If you have any follow-up questions, be sure to check out their service as well. And then quick announcement before we part, there is SareCon coming up at the end of the month. I hope to see you all out there. It's going to be in Long Beach, the Long Beach Hilton down there in Southern California. I'm being told there are less than 20 tickets left. So if you haven't gotten a ticket yet and you're thinking about joining, be sure to check out the Facebook page for the link to the tickets. And we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Kaitlyn.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll see you in Long Beach.
Great. See you.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Stella. Thanks, George.